So, Peter, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today and our Ask the Expert discussion. I guess the first thing to do would just be to give an overview of your career to date and how you ended up where you are now.
Sure, and thank you very much indeed for inviting me to speak. I really appreciate it, Phil. So I'm a career financial crime and compliance professional. I've got 32 years of experience in this field. I started in law enforcement in Hong Kong, specialised in white collar crime. And then gradually, it seemed inevitable that I would end up in financial services. So I joined, I think, JP Morgan originally. I did 9 years there, was a formative member of JP Morgan's AML and sanctions team. This number will astonish you. In those days, there were 3 people. So the founding AML department of JP Morgan was 3 people. Myself in Asia, there was a chap in Europe, and there was a chap in New York, and that was it. I don't know how many thousands there are now.
I hate to think, yeah.
And then I've really grown with it, right from the get-go, and moved through successively senior roles in banking. I've run big global programs in big global banks. I've run broader financial crime, security, resilience and compliance programs in regional banks. But I think as my career has progressed, I've turned into sort of a transformative financial crime and compliance leader, really. And that's really my specialism nowadays, is building something and creating something.
Yeah.
And then I came to Aviva.
It's quite a global and globe-trotting career.
Indeed.
You recently moved into insurance. So are you bringing the lessons learned from sort of the banking part of your history into this new market?
Yeah, in fact, there's lessons that can be learned both ways. But I think some of the stuff that I'd learned in banking was directly relevant, I think, to insurance. So, things. There's been a lot of enforcement actions in banks of late relating to transaction monitoring and screening, and then a lot of questions raised by regulators about system and data governance, footprint analysis, how your systems are governed, how your configurations are governed, how your scenarios are governed, etc. Feed assurance, this sort of thing. I think that was a very valuable lesson that we can bring to insurance from banking. Because of the experience that banking's had. I think secondly, it surprised me that insurance didn't have generally financial crime intelligence units, because that was something that's been in place in banking for quite a long time now. We have built one, and it's adding real value. But that's something that I think insurance can learn from banking. Things like enterprise case management as well. I think insurance generally tends to be a bit more federated than banking. And obviously criminals don't respect organizational boundaries. So, tying together your risk data into enterprise case management, and then managing that intelligence on an enterprise basis, etc., was another big lesson learned. And I think finally, GIMLET, banking has been involved in GIMLET for a number of years very successfully. Insurance and asset management wasn't involved in GIMLET. So, getting involved in that and starting that conversation was another real lesson learned from banking as well.
Yeah. And what do you see as the challenges that you're facing now in the insurance industry in sort of 20 now, and I guess, as far into the future as you can go, really?
Sure. There's a number. So, the business model of insurance is obviously very different to the business model of banking. We're far more reliant on supply chains. In insurance, you think about the number of services that are outsourced, in insurance. So, fraud and bribery in the supply chain, I think is sort of ever present. And obviously, fraud is, as one of our previous CEOs said, fraud risk management is a fundamental in insurance and will always be there. an emerging risk at the moment, which is quite interesting for marine insurers, and this is in the specialty segment, is the sort of the growth of discussion around proliferation financing. There was a RUSI paper last year that then was further developed by OFAC into some OFAC guidance, and then most recently OFSI has issued some guidance. And I think there are some key risks that need to and are being addressed by the marine insurance sector related to that. And then most recently and most pressingly, perhaps, as a result of COVID, right now we have quite a number of investment frauds, cloned websites. In fact, the Investment Association sent out, has sent out numerous missives of late. We've put some warnings on our website as well, and this is really brought about as a result of the sort of the investment conditions that now exist as a result of the pandemic. I think investors, particularly pensions age investors, are looking for better returns than perhaps traditionally they'd been getting, or that the current conditions are offering. And then there are all these weird these cloned websites, ostensibly of well-known brands, that are offering 5%, 6% on a 1-year fixed term bond, and it's all fake. So that is something that is accelerating very, very quickly at the moment. So those are the trends, really.
And obviously, I guess you're a target because you're a big name. Are you having to sort of actively manage that as well within your team?
Yeah. So within our team and also with our peer institutions, because this is not an area obviously where we compete. We support each other. A matter of public record, and it's on our website. We've already worked with various parties to identify 27 cloned websites in respect of our brand ourselves. We've actually put an advisory on our fraud hub, which is on our public website. We know that numerous other investment brands are being targeted in the same way. But yeah, we're working very hard on this, and I think there's a lot of consumer awareness that we've had to do. You would have seen a lot of stuff that we've done in social media. You may have seen it in the tabloids, in the broadsheets, in the industry publications. We even, got on Sky News and various radio programs as well, because it's really all about building awareness here around being cautious about investment returns, perhaps being a little bit better, a bit too good to be true. And that's something that I think we're going to have to continue with in the medium term.
And that's quite worrying, isn't it? Because it is that targeting, it's just blanket targeting, and some luck to, if you hit enough people with a name like yours, they're bound to get 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 who've actually got a product with you and therefore may react.
Yeah, it's very slick. I'd urge you, anybody watching this podcast, to take a look at our website and take a look at some of the how convincing the websites were. One of them, for example, was called avivabonds.com. It contained all of our corporate branding. The products looked very slick. The salespeople that followed up with the victims were very, very slick. It is a very, very slick operation. And I think investors perhaps look for trusted brands, and they might be duped. They think, oh well, I'm already potentially a customer of Aviva, other firms. I trust that brand. So that's fine. I'll invest with them then. And they don't actually realise that it's not us. It's someone has cloned our website and got a domain that sounds like us. And this is a very, very constant and real threat, Phil.
And it's really disappointing. You're almost encouraging people to introduce a level of skepticism that you hope you wouldn't have to do. Myself, I share these sorts of things with my family, and just to try and help them be a little bit cautious rather than saying, oh yeah, that it's yellow, it's got Aviva on, it looks about the right logo, press the button. It's not nice to have to sort of pass that on because you feel like it's a negative thing, but it's kind of essential.
It is, yeah, just to be a little bit skeptical, and to ask yourself, is this really, the investment house that it is purporting itself to be? The other thing that's really disappointing, I think, is that, that there's these fake investment comparison websites that have popped up on, on search engines. I won't, name the search engines, but so if you search, you see these comparison sites, or what purport themselves to be investment comparison sites, and they are completely fraudulent as well. So, you're looking for a decent investment, you go onto a search engine or onto social media, you look around for that, it would purport itself to be a genuine, aggregator site, but it's not. And all that does is then, that's just a lead generator for the fraudsters. So it's very, very, very slick and very convincing, and it's accelerating extremely fast.
Yeah. And you talked about some of your innovation and what's going on at Aviva. We're seeing a trend to move away from like a single big box solution to more big data and analytics. I imagine you're looking at that yourselves.
Yeah, we've actually implemented that. So, I think one of the great things about insurance and asset management is that we have a little bit more flexibility to be a bit more innovative, and also insurers in particular have been were early adopters of analytics, and a lot of insurance houses have very big analytics shops. So we jumped on that. We've actually built an analytics-led approach for all financial crime risk types in our shop, and and it doesn't have to be done hugely expensively either. Because analytics is widely used, or should be widely used by most insurers. You can leverage big data platforms that already exist within your firm, which is exactly what we did. So there was an existing sandbox, and we just ring fenced a part of it for us. Get the DPIA approvals in place with your data privacy colleagues. We designed a bunch of scenarios. We workshopped that with our data scientists and with our SMEs as well. And then we figured out the data points that we would need to run those scenarios. And actually, I mentioned earlier on that we built a financial crime intelligence unit. A part of that unit is data science. So we actually run it out of our FCIU, and we have our own data scientists that are part of that, and we operationalized it. So it's live, and the results have been phenomenal, and the amount of noise that you can take out of the system utilizing analytics, rather than doing it the old way, is really quite profound.
I think a lot of people are switching on to that. It's a lot easier to look for patterns and flows using big data and analytics than it is to try and write a scenario to force it out. So it's definitely a different viewpoint, and it seems once you get it working, it seems to be positive. I guess you've got an actuarial heritage that you can build on in terms of your ability to work with large data sets and drive out.
Absolutely, and loads of people who are Python skilled. There's loads of data scientists across the organization, and things like pricing, even pricing, because obviously pricing of a product is so important, and actuarial as well is so important. It's so much part of our DNA that it's not difficult to find skills that apps actually help you to connect the dots. It's really, really good. So I think that's an area actually where insurance leads banking, frankly.
Does that mean you're bringing together AML, sanctions, fraud, and other activities more closely? Because traditionally the AML and sanctions may have been close together, and fraud was treated as a different approach. Are you bringing them more closely?
Yeah, very much so. We actually, our financial crime sub-function, we're part of group risk, and we are risk stewards for all financial crime risk types. So from fraud all the way across to AML and sanctions, ABC, etc., including the Criminal Finances Act stuff, the facilitation of tax evasion. Simply because the read across from the Bribery Act controls was quite compelling to have it all in the same place. Obviously there is a first line piece that is very much embedded with the business, and that's that obviously that needs to go on, certainly in respect of the fraud, the fraud activity. But what I would say is that, again, having built a financial crime intelligence unit and having now started to roll out enterprise case management, that's less and less of an issue, because we're all working in the same platforms, using the same tooling, operating off of the same framework. Yeah.
Are you seeing people move, because careers have traditionally gone vertically? Are there opportunities to move between AML sanctions and fraud and then work your way up, to second line or wherever you want to go?
I think so. Certainly between fraud and ABC, there's a huge crossover. Yeah. And then from ABC potentially into AML. That tends to be the route. Yeah. That I've seen. But functionally we've grouped fraud with ABC in the second line. Yeah. I mentioned earlier on about some of the supplier fraud stuff. That sometimes becomes ABC issues, and there's a fine line between the two. Yeah. Those skills very much complement one another, and so functionally we've combined those skills actually, which is useful.
Yeah, we've seen ABC has whilst it's had the legislative backing, it seems to have been the quieter of the disciplines. Are you see, and you've obviously lined it up with fraud. Are you seeing more activity in that space now? Are you seeing those case studies come through and those challenges?
Well, I wouldn't be able to comment on case studies, but I mentioned earlier on, I think one of the interesting things about a business model for an insurer is the sort of distributed, supplier network, and that does present ABC and fraud vulnerabilities both, in that supply chain. So. Yeah,
and with your business as well, I guess the different parts of the world you operate in, there are different threats.
Yes, and also the business mix is different. We're a full service composite insurer and asset manager in the UK, for example, and we are in Ireland. But in Canada, we have only general insurance and asset management. Right. We don't have a life insurance business there at the moment. So the threats and vulnerabilities are different depending on the mix of the business, really. Yeah. But where it's the sort of the comments that I've made thus far have really been addressing a sort of composite risk. Holistically.
We're obviously now, although it's been off topic for a while now, we've got the changes coming at the end of the year with Brexit and moving away from the European Union. Do you see that having an impact on intelligence gathering and intelligence sharing for an organisation like yours?
Well, it depends on the terms of the final deal, obviously, and I hope and pray that that we'll be able to thrash something out that helps us with that. And I really hope not. But I do fear that data sharing will be a sensitive area for a while. I think there is a tendency, given that this is a fairly new science or new discipline, there is a tendency sometimes for data privacy officers to be very conservative. And so, I do fear, I think, that that with Brexit, that might inhibit us for a little while. Yeah. That's definitely something that we need to work on. But I know that the UK government, for example, is lobbying hard for for activities such as financial crime risk management to be better protected as a part of the separation deal. So we can but hope.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. We've seen in the Netherlands, a group of banks have come together and they started to pool their financial crime data. Some of the colleagues we've worked with before, ABN AMRO, are part of that activity. So they're kind of coming together in financial crime. Do you think that would work in either in banking or insurance and banking in the UK?
Absolutely. Firm believer in this. Obviously, it needs to be properly governed. It needs to have that right governance around it. But we all have different pieces to the puzzle. So, for example, the case that I described earlier on with the cloned websites, there's a real crossover there between insurers and asset managers, so life insurance businesses that sell investment products, pensions and investments, etc., or pure asset managers, they're all getting hit with those cloned websites, and they're all getting reports of that. But the proceeds of that are being paid into brick and mortar banks, right? Yeah. And very often it's the accounts of challenger platforms at bricks and mortar banks.
Yeah.
So there is very much a need for us to collaborate on sharing that intelligence and sharing the lessons learned from that. Not just the insurance sector and the banking sector, and not just the traditional banking sector, but also the challenger platforms. I think multiple sectors need to be working together in order for this to be effective. The NCA or City of London Police or whoever cannot do this on their own.
No.
They need help connecting the dots. There are mechanisms that have started to emerge, such as Section 11, that do allow us to work together. And I think that we need to start thinking about how we leverage those frameworks to better collaborate. Draw a broader, more joined up picture, and then get that over to the authorities so that they can enforce. Because I think that's just going to make it so much better, so much more powerful.
Yeah, because I guess some of the criticism of the existing SAR approach with defensive SARs and the sort of volume that are put in, and therefore the ability for them to add value, I guess it again plays off against that, isn't it? As you said before, it's about the quality, not necessarily the quantity that you put in.
Yeah, it is. About the quality, and if we can connect as many of the dots as possible, we're saving a lot of time there for law enforcement, and we're increasing the likelihood of a really good outcome, for the public, so for the investing public. Yeah. So I think the more that we can do around that, the better. Frankly, I'm a firm advocate of that.
Okay, super. Well, that's all the questions that I had down for the moment. Thank you very much for taking the time today. We do appreciate it. Dialing in from the lobby, I think, at Aviva is the background you've got running there, which is very nice. Let's hope we can all get back to those offices soon. So, Peter, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Phil.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.